It wasn't connecting for a minute. Hi, everybody. Hey, Diane. Hi, Poppy. Marlene. Marlene, we are on different coasts. Hey, we are a long way apart right now. Hi, Andres. Nice to see you, my friend Tish. Hi, Sarah. Hey, Chloe. Hi, nice to have everyone. Helen, hey. It's didn't even ask Helen, how hot is it down there? Hi, Jane. Well, I'm great, thank you, but I'm in a beautiful city on a perfect weather day. A little humid, actually. Um, I heard Um, oh, the East Coast, right? Boston is under a heat alert too. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I want to launch straight into things because I never have enough time for these tours, and I should almost put it up for more time, but I have to go and do other things today. So I finished a tour. By the way, I'm Patrick Toomey. If you haven't met me, hi, it's nice to meet you. I'm cold and rainy, Jane. I know. I've been watching. Um, I do, but I don't live here. I live 1,000 kilometers east of here, high up in the Rocky Mountains. Hi, Deborah. And I live way up in the Canadian Rockies in Banff National Park, but I'm not there. I'm down here in beautiful, beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia. Greater Vancouver, about 2.8 million people. But this is a tour that I have to do anytime I come here, and there's so many versions I can do of it. But I've wandered over, and I'm in Stanley Park. By the way, anyone who's really, really new here, welcome to Hago. Welcome to the family. Hi, Ruth. Hey, Natalie. Um, and it's pretty gorgeous. You see old growth cedar tree, except that one is actually a stump. Look at that. Bon, 39 avec l'humidité impossible. Here is about 24, 25. It's a little humid today because there's some low clouds, but I can't really whine too much. So Stanley Park, 405 hectares or 1,000 acres. Um, well, Diane, is it really? Diane, really, truly? Somebody grab a screenshot. It is Diane's 1,500th tour. I'm giving you I don't have my hands together, but that badge of love, right? Diane, 15. Well, what is this gentleman right here saying? He is saying, why do these pigeons keep pooping on me? That's not really what he's saying. He's saying, congratulations, Diane. We love you here. This is Lord Stanley, 13th, 15th Earl of Derby, I think, but he was Canada's 6th Governor General and the first one to have to enact what a Governor General does, because while he was Governor General, John A. Macdonald, the first Prime Minister who was in his second round, he had been lost and reelected, but died in 1891. And so this gentleman actually had to pick a new Prime Minister according to the parliamentary system at that point. But he did come all the way out here by train and understood the magnificence of this land, and they protected this huge park area. 1889, remember, Vancouver's really settled only about 1875 as Grandville. I will talk about the actual inhabitants previous to this, but I just want to come around and show this because what I just want to say right here is when you look at the statue and what it says on the front of it is to the enjoyment of people of all colors, creeds, and customs for all time. I named the Stanley Park. I have not been able to officially quantify that that was a quote that came out of his mouth. I like to think it is. Now, he was close friends with Johnny MacDonald, who was, on all accounts, not a particularly nice person. Hi, Joanne. But if that is a true quote, I love it. Hang on really closely. Close your eyes 1 second. I do a Toomey twist here. We'll get the full thing. What you can do is take a postcard there and flip it on the side. But boy, oh boy, I do hope that that quote did actually came out. Oh, Marlene, so many things to be said there. We're switching back. So, hi, Kristen. So, on the last tour, of course, we met Marty and Kristen, and Marty from Bowen Island, who comes on our tours, and what a pleasure to meet him. I wasn't going to cancel this tour on everyone. I almost wish I had, just to have spent a bit more time chatting with him, because a fascinating fellow. But I'm here up in Stanley Park. So we wanted to start with Lord Stanley. The park is, of course, the heart and soul of Vancouver's identity. This is one of the most modern cities in the world. We call it the Crystal City. And to give you a little sense of the Crystal City up there in the distance, there's the Vancouver Rowing Club. But look at those huge towers out there. This is the trade-off, right? This is what matters, is you live in a little shoebox, modern, but shoebox apartment, and yet in any direction just about, you can come out to a wilderness. That's what makes Vancouver such a livable city. There were several years, 25 years ago, for example, 20 years ago, where Vancouver was continuously rated the most livable city on earth, not just by like The Economist, but the Human Development Index, all of those sort of things. Hey, Frank, you're down in southern Alberta. But it's no longer considered the most livable city because housing prices are way too much, and that's just the reality. I actually ran into another. There's giant cedars. There are hemlocks up in here too, but the biggest ones are the giant cedars, Ruth. But I ran into an old driver that I knew today, and the guy that was working with him I didn't know. Really nice guy, French guy, but lives here. So I told him all about Hago. So we'll see if maybe he wants to come along and do some tours. But I was asking him about rents because he lives down west of Denman, and he's saying really for a one bedroom now anywhere in the city, you're looking at a minimum of about $2,000 a month, just to put it in. And that's either a studio or one bedroom. So that gives you a little bit of a sense of the cost of living out here. But yeah, so there is actually a variety of these cedar trees. They fall in the sequoia family. These are the northern version of those giant cedars you see down in Northern California. But what I wanted to show you in this whole stump right over here is this is all the activity of woodpeckers in Toronto, Marlene, or out here. So these have all been, hi Dolores. Well, that's for a little one bedroom, right? I mean, a house or anything. But yeah, this is where woodpeckers dig in here. And of course, on the soft bark, it draws the bugs up and they get to eat them. So what I'd like to do, of course, I cannot come for a tour of Stanley Park and not take you down by the totem pole. So I'm going to expedite my route a little bit. It's nice to wander along the water, but I want to make sure I have enough time to share that area with everyone. Hey, Viola, it's been a while. And Paula, good to have you back. But the park itself, say roughly 1,000 acres, there's one road through it that leads to the Lionsgate Bridge, or the first Narrows, over to the North Shore. Lionsgate Bridge more or less marks the boundary between North Vancouver and West Vancouver. They will never widen that road. There's obviously a road around the outside of the park and the famous seawall. One of the features of Vancouver for Vancouverites or visitors is this whole seawall. If you ever come cycling here, you cycle anti-clockwise or counterclockwise around. And a statement that I always feel the need to say, we love visitors here. I've been guiding here my whole life. Please, if you're walking around Vancouver, read the signs which tell you, you did, Brandy. You did absolutely just see me there. But yeah, I hoofed it down here. But please don't walk on the paths that say cycle. It's pretty easy to avoid them. But boy, oh boy, can you make people upset. The one way. And I have maybe never on a Hago tour walked across the cycling path and not watched where I was going. We'll never know. But I'm down here in the shade of this massive park. There's a raccoon population here. Some of you might remember, Kathy, you're not here by chance, are you? I had a lovely message from Kathy, who comes on a lot of our tours today, but I know she's had a lot going on. But when I met up with them one time here about a year and a half ago, there were coyotes in the park actually attacking people. Now that's a bad thing, of course, but that was clearly they began to assign food to people. And it's taken a long time to clear that up. I'm not seeing the big signs around, so the problem must have been taken care of, but that is reality. Yeah, Lynn, well, they think there was only about 12 of them in here, but they had learned to associate people with food. So they still do horse-drawn tours down through the park here. To go around the outside of the park, which is what most people do, is about now 12 kilometers, 8 miles, because it was built before we became metric. So they have these mile markers as you come around the base. One-way driving. Driving is a little bit frustrating with a big tour coach at the moment. And why I say that is because they blocked off one of the driving lanes during the pandemic, so people had access to stay socially distanced, which was good. But now in a tour coach, it really is just on the line. Here's some wild, these are probably raspberries coming out right now, and you can walk around Vancouver and pick them all usually later in August and into September and make you jam, and it's a lovely thing. But let's come down by the water, shall we? So cross on over. Now this bay, and when I was lucky enough to be here for my birthday last year, my son booked an Indigenous tour of Stanley Park, and I absolutely talked to the guide, told him all about Hago, but he actually is much more dedicated to working in his own community, so fair enough. But we talk about the fact that people were able to live here off the land with a huge amount of access to food. Sorry, I didn't catch what the comment was, but the salmon come in here, and the salmon runs every year. But what he did when I had the tour, he said, imagine you're living here. He said, now I want you to look out at all those buildings, which people will say is denser than Manhattan. It's not really true, but there is still a very, very dense population out there, and very dense population of people living down there. But imagine, close your eyes for a minute, and then open them again, and imagine the whole world just looked like this. You had all of this, and then you had access to the ocean, you had access to animals, there was an abundance of food. You probably could have even almost survived as a vegetarian out here once upon a time, but it was a lot of seafood. And they had, and of course, the seawall, which is great fun to walk on. The downside to the seawall now is it's blocking the natural fresh water from flowing out of the park and into the bay. So they're gradually trying to re-encourage the growth of eelgrass along here. Eelgrass, thanks, Fiona. Eelgrass attracts a lot of bugs. Well, the bugs then become a source of food for the marine wildlife, the small wildlife that sits right on that line between the salt water and the open air. And that's part of the whole food chain. So I thought he said, Joanne, they said, Stephen's Green, you let the birds feed out of your hands. Here we have a very, very strong perspective on never feeding wildlife of any sort. Of course, I live in a national park, so it's a very, very strict rule where I live, and we have signs out that say $25,000 fine for feeding wildlife. Um, and and there's But yes, over in Granville Island, I'll try and squeeze in a tour on Granville Island while I'm here at the coast, because I will be down there one of these days. But I remember, I'll tell you a quick story about Finn, about my son. I'm sorry I missed his tour today. I was guiding a tour here on a bus. Now there comes a cormorant into land, but of course Finn earns his own money and he spends his own money. And one time we were down at Granville Island, and Finn loves fish. He's a real fish eater. I mean, he takes sushi for lunch to school, and he went and got wild salmon, fish and chips for lunch down there. And he went outside, and a gull dive bombed him and grabbed it, and then it fell, and Finn refused to eat it after that. I'm like, well, I'll eat it, kid. I'll have your wild salmon. You spent $20 on it. But it was interesting. He was so shocked. and, I think it actually hurt his hand a little bit too. Because now, if you hear a buzzing in the distance, those are the float planes taking off. We were looking at them on the previous tour. But I just want to scan around to this side where you see these lower buildings out here. This is the area we call as west of Denman in Vancouver. Denman's a street. I'm almost straight across from it. Yeah, no, I tell you what, Tina, so true. But straight across is Denman. That's the last real commercial street. And then all those smaller high rises to the right of the screen, that was the first area of towers in the west of Canada for sure. One of the few places where people would actually grow up in towers their whole lives. And then you'd walk out and you'd have this 1,000 acres of Stanley Park. If I walk straight through there, I'd be over at the Laughing Statue where I was last night. From here to English Bay, the beach, and the Laughing Statue, take me about, a half hour would be a lot of time for me to make it over there. So that's how close everything is. To go right around the park itself, of course, is quite a long walk. But you see, even on a regular weekday, there's people out here. Thanks, Judy. Enjoying it from all over the area. Yeah, I know last night was too late for a lot of people over in the UK, but I sure do like doing those evening tours. That cormorant is having a grand old time down here in the water. She keeps diving and coming up quite successfully with some fish. Good time for fishing right now, because the tide's coming up and the smaller fish are coming in. I'm just going to go around these folks here for a second. So we're over by the Vancouver Yacht Club out here. And of course, if you have to ask how much it costs to park your boat here, you can't afford it. So, hi Islam. Merhaba. So as I look out in the distance, I can actually see a couple of the big towers. Not the first one from it, just behind it is the hey Pamela, it's what we call sort of the 7-star Shangri-La Hotel. I love telling this story because a number of years ago, there's Mrs. Mummy Duck there hanging out. having a little bite to eat too. But I I was given a free room one night by a tourism promotion thing, so I actually got to stay in the Shangri-La, which is pretty cool. And so I went up to my room, and I consider myself, re- reasonably bright and well traveled. I couldn't open the curtains, I couldn't turn the lights on. It was all this mood system, and it was clearly way beyond my plebeian abilities of looking outside. So then I was frustrated enough. I thought, I'm going to go down to the swimming pool and go for a swim. But when I went down there, the swimming pool, which looked gorgeous in the photos, was kind of triangular and made, I think, for photographing. And I couldn't figure out how to swim lengths. So my only solution was to go to the bar. And then I had to go to a bar outside because the one inside was too expensive. So all that noted, there's an island over here. You'll see a bridge. Oh, big freighter coming into the bay. That is Burrard Inlet out in the distance there. I'll tell you more about that. But this is going over to an island that is now run by the Canadian Navy. You see very little military presence really anywhere in this country. And I think that's a nice thing. Generally speaking, I have respect for the Canadian military because so many people who have joined ever since Lester B. Pearson, have joined with the belief in peacekeeping. It is a rough life. But this island is actually an act of colonialism because this is where the Coast Salish people who lived here for thousands of years would leave bodies out when people passed. Remember, and I don't want to overgeneralize about this, but generally speaking, in the Indigenous outlook on what we now consider Western Canada, it's not that there was a belief in reincarnation or so much in afterlife as much as that an echo of you was left behind. I'm not a person of faith, but I find that as a spiritual outlook really beautiful because, I mean, I have a son and I can certainly see the echo of his mom in him and the echo of me in him. So there is an echo. So it is a lovely sort of tradition. But they left their bodies out here. But then when the missionaries came in here, they started burying people when they died. And that was actually an act of colonial statement as well, because here you believed you went back to nature. Remember, this was a land of abundance, and this was a land of the potlatch. What's the potlatch? Potlatch was the great feast where you were judged by your generosity. And when you take away food insecurity, which is a huge factor in most of the history of humanity, no matter where you lived in the world, once you take that away, then suddenly you have a lot more time for other things. And out here on the west coast of what is now Northwest US and West Coast Canada, some of the greatest artistic traditions, of course. Joyce, I can be a person of faith if I suppose I could be I could be all sorts of things if I really wanted to be. But that's to each their own. I Yeah, I don't share much of that, but I sure do respect someone. But as I shared this the other day, but I have a lovely gentleman on this particular tour who comes from the southern U.S. and person very much of faith. But he's 81 years old, and he said to me, yeah, I'm absolutely a Christian. He said, but all that judgment stuff is beyond, way above my pay grade. I thought, what a lovely outlook in life. Um, yeah, the tide, I believe that it does look quite low right here. I think it's coming in because it is higher than it was earlier. We had quite a low tide. The largest tides in the world are in the Bay of Fundy. They're between Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. The second highest tides in the world are Cook Inlet up there by the Kenai Peninsula near Anchorage, Alaska. One of the greatest sights I've ever been able to enjoy in my life was watching those tides going out and the beluga whales going out. Now here we don't get belugas, but just out, not so much in the inlet here because the inlet is really up here in Burrard Inlet. The only average is about 63 meters deep, but out in Howe Sound and out past Horseshoe Bay, you will see orcas come up and down, and of course humpbacks do travel up the coast as well. And then every now and then there's gray whales, but in through here very often. If I'm here in the morning, and I've shown this on tours here, I've shown harbor seals, of course, swimming around out here, which is just a lovely thing. So I'm already getting close to where the totem poles are. Sharon, I love beluga whales too. It's pretty hard not to. And they're so expressive when you see them, how much their heads move. You know what I'm going to do for fun, everyone? I'm going to cut over to the park this time, rather than carrying on in the water. I'm going to make my way out here. By the way, I'm walking over shells everywhere because the gulls and the crows pick them up and then drop them from great heights in order to break them open and dig into the food. So we're coming out to the in the Bay of Fundy. Yeah. Well, the Hopewell Rocks up there, and I need to get down there to do some tours. But there you're looking now at the mountains of the North Shore in the distance. So West Vancouver's up there, and Cypress Bowl ski area. This is the Brockton Oval, and they actually play cricket here. And say when they play cricket here, which is a pretty exciting game, there's a very large South Asian population in Greater Vancouver. So India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and of course cricket is the most popular sport there. Of course, Finn's mom is from Tasmania, so Finn's learned quite a lot about cricket when he's been down there. I've been trying to study cricket, but I'm only good at watching grass grow for so long. I'm sorry. There's the cricket pitch. I just love a game that can go on for 5 days and end in a tie. But you know what? I've learned enough about it. Sorry, there's just two crows here having a cuddle. And you know what? Isn't that just, look at that. There's some lovebirds. I really believe the one on the right was actually sort of, I guess, grooming the other one. Isn't that lovely? There you go. So we get, and by the way, I haven't today, but I often see bald eagles right here in the park. But I am coming up to what was absolutely a home for the Coast Salish people right around here in the Millens. Those are the big piles of shells that would be left behind. They could carbon date it to find the age. People were living continuously right on this bay for at least 3,500 years. They are extremely smart, Diane. People have been migrating up and down this coast emphatically for, well, we're probably up to 25,000 years now, maybe even longer. Again, there was a massive earthquake about 500 years ago. We're still waiting for one of those, but the last one subducted a lot of the coast and so covered up a lot of the evidence of the area. But I want to come and talk about this village for a minute. Marlene, Diane, we're talking about how smart crows are. They did this study at Berkeley University quite a number of years ago, where they dressed someone like a clown, walked out and threw rocks at the crows. I really, really tried to attack them without obviously hopefully hurting them. Waited a whole bird generation, which I don't know, it's 5 years or something. Then walked someone out dressed like a clown again, and they all started squawking and talking. They were generational learning. By the way, we were talking about the trees earlier. Out front of me is one of the few endemic hardwood trees to this coast, and this is called an arbutus tree, or an arbusier. I just have to show you the float plane coming over. We were watching them take off and landing earlier, harbor air there. But have a look at this tree. Just gorgeous and really dense hardwood. And I believe they grow out, for example, in Wales. I've heard that. So there's different dots around them. For you Australians on board, do you have arbutus trees? I mean, it looks a tiny bit like a eucalyptus. It doesn't smell at all that way. But this peeling bark, which always gets me thinking, I don't like people spray or putting their names in. But yeah, that is really dense wood. Whereas the cedar trees, of course, have a natural fire resistance, which is why they can grow so old. They have just a natural amount of moisture that comes out on the bark, out on the outsides here, and that's what repels fire to some extent. So let's come in to the village here, ladies and gentlemen. So you can imagine living here in the winter. It's not too cold. The summer, it's warm today. In fact, I instead of wishing I'd worn a t-shirt. But this is one of the three gates. The Salish population from around here, the Musqueam people, would have built in gates, not poles. Now, Rose Cole lived here all the way to the 1930s, and she was from this population, this community, the last inhabitant. So literally they had the foresight in this little nascent city well over 100 years ago. Dolores, to have the, 120, 35 years ago, to have the foresight to set all this aside. What wonderful vision for the future of the city. However, not only did they take the Indigenous population and kick them out of the park, they then rebuilt this area to have a thought a native village should look like. And so the famous totem poles up here are wonderful, but they come from Haida Gwaii. They don't come from here. Haida Gwaii is up the coast. It's virtually an independent nation within the Canadian context, and I have a huge amount of respect for them. I love their totems. I love their art, but it's not what people would have done here. However, Rose Cole Yelton Memorial Pole right here, raised in 2009, and The Cole family lived until 1935. Probably the last person who actually was born, the last person still living who was born here, right on Brockton Point. So when we say native village, what they're saying is their goal was to rebuild the village the way the people here felt a native village to look when there was actually an Indigenous village here. Hang on tight one more time, Marlene. Ta-da! There we go. So there's the Rose Cole Yelton Memorial Pole. And remember, the poles here, hang on again. So the poles are not religious. They're family history. They're stories of creation. They're stories of family histories. This, for example, is a reverse pole over here. It's kind of fun. But there's so many different ones, and traditionally they should be built and left in situ, and they eventually go back to the land. Each one has a story, of course. Sure, I'll go. I'm actually going to go around to a different gate there. I'm going to go over, look across the bay too now, because there's 3 of the gates that come around. But I'll just give you one here, because this one I find particularly interesting, because the poles of the Coast Salish people often have the arms there out. It might be too bright to show it. This is a 1991 one. Yeah, I think that might just be a little too dark to make out. I'm sorry, everyone, my screen has just gone super dark on me right in the sun, so it's a little bit warm. But Tina, let me go around to where the other gates are. I can show you this gate from the back, for example. So this would have been the entrances into the villages around here. And gradually, of course, these communities are all coming back to life. You would have welcomed people in the potlatch culture, and people would have traveled, and communities were formed around family units, but say up to maybe 14 families living together. I just don't want to generalize about each one of the cultures, because they're all genuinely different. There are 3 major language groups right around Vancouver. I love the unpainted pole at the back as well. It really is dramatic, and so often they're even. Thanks, Joy. Now, I was talking about the coyotes. There is one sign here. I will show you the sign here. And how are we doing for time? We're doing good for time right now. There you go. I see. So it's not as serious as it was in the past. Very detailed. But yeah, if I just come around the side, I'm glad they put the arches in. Now, remember, when we hosted the 2010 Winter Olympics, there was a lot of support from the Indigenous communities, and they renamed the whole route to Whistler, the cultural route. This doesn't make up for all the past wrongs, but it is part, very much, of the process of rebuilding a fair and just society here. Have a look at that. Gorgeous, isn't it beautiful? And as I say, when I did a tour here with an Indigenous guide, I was just, and again, and because I go to lectures a lot at home, of course, with elders, and every single time they reach out and say, we have to build a better British Columbia or a better Canada or a better Alberta together. We have to be inclusive. And I think, God, if I were a child of all that abuse, I'd probably be pretty angry. But the fact that their cultures have survived 500 years of assault and genuine genocide. I mean, up to 90% of the population being wiped out. But then, hola Jose, un gusto verte aquí. But also to reach out to everyone. It's a pretty honorable thing, right? So I try and extract some of my pacifism from yeah, exactly. So well, I know we can spend all day with the totems, and we deserve to. That, by the way, is probably the most photographed tourist visited site in all of Canada. So now we're looking out in the distance. There's the sulfur that's all a byproduct of the oil industry in Alberta and Saskatchewan. They really do need to redo some of these panels over here. Just going to be a little careful coming out here across the street. Hi, everyone joining on. I am sorry, I'm having a little bit of trouble seeing the screen at all right now, just because it's been so bright out here that the screen goes dim, and I still haven't figured out how to tell it not to do it. Boy, oh boy, are people doing photos everywhere today. There, ladies and gentlemen, gives you a sense of the length of the seawall out here, right around about 8.3 miles or something, 13 kilometers underneath the mighty Lionsgate Bridge. And of course, I was talking about the bridge earlier. That was built by the Guinness family. They were heavily involved in the early development of Vancouver. We're looking across to the city of West Vancouver and the British properties up there, and the beach on the far side, Ambleside. But there's the city of West Vancouver. You will see snowy peaks up in the distance there. That's up the Capilano Valley, Capilano River, and the Cleveland Dam, and then Grouse Mountain out in front of us. I will try and put up a tour in Grouse Mountain probably on Monday, hopefully. I'm hoping to do the hike up too, so I will be up there with a group. So I'm going over to Victoria tomorrow, but I'll be back. So I'm spending quite a bit of time out here at the coast, which is never a punishing thing to do. But in between, just when you come over the bridge, those buildings are in the distance in front of them. You can't see all that land, but that is Musqueam First Nation that lives there. And that would be, and it's not openly traded because it's their land, a bit like I live in Banff and it's not openly traded land. But that would be, if it were openly traded, that would be among the most valuable real estate on planet Earth. And I don't really know why the Guinnesses are here, rather just I think by the fact that they probably had family over here and started investing in this growing city would be my best bet. They were probably divesting some of their wealth because at the end of the day, you know, they, there's only so many pints of Guinness you can sell, even in Ireland. although I am coming over, so we'll do our best to support their general works. But I know they were considered very good employers once upon a time. Yeah, I always find those nights in Ireland, just we're either going to have dinner or we're going to have a few pints of Guinness. No point in doing both. Now this is Burrard Inlet, and as the tide is starting to come up through here, last time some of you joined me here, there was a harbor seal when I started the tour out in the morning. That point around there leads to the 9 o'clock gun, the old maritime gun. And of course, you're looking over now to the city of North Vancouver in the municipal district. And that is Mount Seymour up in the distance, up top there. And that is another one of the ski areas right here on the North Shore. But what is so meaningful? No, there isn't here, but there is in Dublin, apparently, Tina. But about basically where the houses end up the side of the mountains, that's more or less your kind of permanent snow line in the winter. And they do get a good snowpack. They do get snow on the ground, but just not that much, not like where we live, of course, because obviously I'm at sea level here, right? So I am about 1,500 meters or 5,000 feet below my house. But two times ago or something, when I was coming down from the top of Grouse Mountain, got the car and was just driving down, and about the second house down, a black bear was walking into the backyard. So there's tons of wilderness, big raccoon population as well. See, there's the markers around here. So the park is, of course, just the life of this city. If you're able to scan out a map, you'll probably see quite easily that there's this big inlet here, and then to the south side, there's False Creek, English Bay, and False Creek. So a whole series of inlets. It was miles because it was laid out way, way, way before we became metric. We became metric in the 70s, right? So they have the mile markers, but I can give distances in miles and things, but I'm really just making up the number. It's Fahrenheit I make up the most, but yeah, we're pretty metric. Although I think all of us we're so funny here as Canadians, actually, because I think it's fair to say that most of us talk in kilometers, we talk in Celsius, yet we weigh ourselves in pounds, and then we'd say something like, "Oh, that's 10 feet over there," but we wouldn't know what that means, So we are quite a mixed population that way. So let's just wander around, and I'll take you over to the third gate, and then we'll wander out and look at the harbor. And then we'll call it a day at that point. What I'm doing with the rest of my day is I'm going to walk back to my hotel, which will take me about 40 minutes or so. And then probably have a shower because I'm pretty hot now, but nice hot. And then I will take my group out for dinner tonight. And then some are coming over to Vancouver Island and some are flying home tomorrow. So unfortunately, I have to be up for 3 a.m. tomorrow. So not going to be a wild night of partying out here. But let's just wander through. So, of course, every time I come to this park with a group, Joanne, so the tour sort of officially finishes tomorrow, but there's an extension for 2 days to Victoria. So I fully intend to catch up with our friend Elizabeth over there. And I might even get to catch up with Dan in a few days. So I was just looking around. The other arch is over here. But, of course, I am working, and this next one, I'm doing another 5-day tour. It's a small specialty one, but packing a lot in a few days. So I'll come back to Vancouver, and I'll go back to Victoria, and then I will go home and have a week at home with that fabulous kid of mine before we fly off to the Emerald Isle. So here's the last arch here. So that would have been probably the whole village, but out in this bay, just this bay alone, you had an abundance of food. They just would not have encountered food shortages, and they would have had both above ground houses and pit houses. Pit houses would be about at least 2 meters deep into the ground, like a modern basement with a mound top, and that would have been just fine in the middle of winter. So I just come up and show you a map up here to give you. No, it's not my bus. Tina, the bus is done for the afternoon, so I walked all the way here from, well, not that far really. So there's the park, Beaver Lake in the middle. I did do a tour once up at Prospect Point, but everything's still closed up there. And I'm going to come get on my bike sometime and do that for everyone again, other parts of the park. But see, I was standing up during the previous tour with Marty up by the cruise ships out there. So pretty fabulous view across at the mighty city, Vancouver, BC. There it is. Yeah, that is Vancouver in all its glory when it's this kind of weather. And dense population, but of course in a small area. And way in the distance out there are the tall buildings of Burnaby, the next city over. It's all part of Greater Vancouver. Are they Flower Gardens Park? Yes, there are, Judy. Really where I started the tour, I was just on the edge of the flower gardens up there. So yes, they are still there. But the city of Burnaby is where Joe Sakic's from, famous hockey player, but Michael Bublé, if you're a Bublé fan. I drink bubblies quite a lot, so I clearly am a fan as well. So I'm just back in the oh, and here's a couple of all the geese are down here hanging out now, telling stories and enjoying the sun. So there we are, ladies and gentlemen. No, merci. Ben, moi aussi, j'adore notre ville. So, as always, well, no, it's fun. Thank you, Chloe. It's nice to make time to share this with everyone, and it's fun to, of course, I try and bring you all along to all the different places I'm going. You know, I do. You might have realized I travel quite a lot, so so it's obviously I can take you around the world. Thanks, everybody. As always, I like to say peace and love. I've had a very, very nice conversation with Marty, who came over very kindly to meet me. It's I wish that I'd actually had time to sit down and have a drink, but it was a real treat to spend time with them. A very, very interesting. I'm not here to tell their story, but very interesting story in the fact that they made their way up here. So that's pretty neat, isn't it? So, ladies and gentlemen, under the huge maple, this is a coastal maple. This is actually a native maple to the coast here. There's an ornamental one that was introduced, but these maples are out here. No maples where I live, high up in the trees. And Diane, I want to give you a great big hug, everyone. This is Diane's 1,500th Hago tour, 1,500. Diane, that seems odd because I don't think I've done 1,500. Maybe with Ben. No, but really, Diane, it's big hugs to you. And you are so much part of our community and so warm. Well, and so warm and so kind and so supportive. So, it's lovely to have you here. All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we are. I have so many more stories to tell you, but I'm going to call it quits at that point. I'm standing out at Hallelujah Point. So you can think of a little Katie Lang who sang here in the opening ceremony to sing Hallelujah. So maybe listen to that when we say goodbye. Lots of love, ladies and gentlemen. Here's Canada Place. And from beautiful Stanley Park. And I will see you hopefully super late or super early tomorrow. And we'll catch up as soon as possible. Lots of love. Bye-bye.